Good news, your property taxes are going down 10 to 25% here in Boise over this next year. Or, well, maybe. Let me explain. Hey, what's up? Benj here with Triple Cord Real Estate, and in this video, I want to talk about the new tax law that was just vetoed by our Governor Brad Little, but then overridden by a supermajority in the Idaho House and Senate. Now, what's interesting about this tax bill, which is now law, is it's unclear whether or not you, the taxpayer, will actually see a reduction in your property taxes. So I'll talk about all of that, and then at the end, I'll also talk about how much we actually are paying in property taxes here in Idaho, which parts of the Treasure Valley have a cheaper property tax rate, and how all of that compares to the rest of the United States. But first, let me give you a quick review of how property taxes actually work here in Idaho. So there's actually two different property tax systems that are used in the United States. The first is called the rate-based system. So in this system, your property tax is directly related to the assessed value of your house. To figure out how much you pay in property taxes, you basically take the tax rate and multiply it by the assessed value of your house, and that's how much you'll pay to the government. So that's not the system that is used in Idaho. In Idaho, we use what is called the levy rate system. Now, this system is actually quite complicated to understand, so much so that I actually did a whole video on that, so you can check out this one right here if you want to get more details. But basically, the way that this works is your property taxes are more or less calculated based on the tax district's budgets that are funded by the property taxes. And the way this works is all of the budgets of the different tax districts that are funded by the property taxes are added up together into one lump sum. And then that total is divided by the total taxable value of all of the homes and real estate in the area that you live in. And that gives you what's called a levy rate. And then that levy rate is multiplied by the assessed value of your home, and that determines how much you actually pay in property taxes to the local government. Now, in spite of the fact that this is actually quite a complicated system to understand and work through, the advantage of this tax system is that it results in less drastic swings in property tax bills. And let me give you an example of this. So here's an actual home in southwest Boise that I pulled the tax records from. In 2019, it was assessed at $240,400, and the property taxes for that year were $1,247. Now notice how the next year the assessed value actually went up by about $20,000. 2020 was assessed at $259,000. But look at what happened to the property tax bill. It actually went down by $100, went down to $1,146. 2021, 2022 were crazy real estate years, and the house prices ballooned and exploded. So in 2022, this house was assessed at $437,000, almost double of what it was 3 years earlier than that. But look at what happened to the property tax on this house. It only went up about $200, went up to $1,358. Now, as you probably know, property taxes fund a number of local institutions and departments. So here's an example from my house. Here's where my property taxes are going. College of Western Idaho, Ada Recreation, the library, the fire department, the police. I thought it was interesting, there's also a little piece of the pie that is going to the mosquito abatement department. So because property taxes are what fund these various institutions, it's very difficult to actually cut property taxes, because the second you cut property taxes, that institution actually gets less money. So for this reason, when lawmakers cut property taxes, they have to find other means to continue to fund these various institutions, which are usually funded by your property taxes. Now, it's important to note that the state of Idaho does not actually spend property tax money. What the state of Idaho does is it collects property taxes and then gives that money to the various districts, the tax districts, that then spend the money themselves. The reason this is important to remember is that this new bill that was just signed into law doesn't actually address the issue of spending. What it does is it temporarily lowers individuals' property tax bills, but it doesn't address the budgets of the various tax districts and institutions that are funded by the property taxes. So the way that this law actually works is it takes $230 million of federal money and other sources, along with $150 million of excess cash flow from Idaho's surplus, and it uses that money to fund in part, some of these tax districts. Now, half of the money that is set aside in this law is intended to lower property taxes. And then the other half of that money pays down school bonds and levies. Now, just as a side note, a levy is actually a tax that is collected through your property taxes to fund schools. Bonds, on the other hand, are like loans that schools take to build facilities. So I heard somebody put it this way once: a levy is used for learning and a bond is for building. So if you want to illustrate how this law works, let's take a hypothetical example. Let's say that the police, the school, the fire department all have a budget of about $1 million, and we'll throw in the mosquito abatement as well. They pay, their budget is $50,000 per year. In a normal year, all of those tax districts are funded by property taxes. What this law does, though, is it takes some surplus money and it funds part of those budgets through other means, which results in less money needing to be collected through property taxes, or so that's the hope. So the question that everybody asks is, well, where is all of this money coming from? Well, it's actually coming from several sources. A lot of the money comes from Idaho sales tax and from surplus income tax. You might have remembered that last year, Idaho finished the fiscal year with a $1.4 billion surplus, which was actually $574 million more than forecasted. And over the year, the state revenue of Idaho grew 23.7%. So not a bad year for the state of Idaho. So what the state is doing is it's using some of that excess cash to fund the different tax districts that are normally funded through property taxes. But we have to mention here that this really is just a short-term solution, because as I said, the state of Idaho actually doesn't spend any money, and so the real issue is who is spending the money and setting these budgets. And those are the local tax districts. So if we want to address the root of the problem, we actually have to address the spending. In theory, the police, the fire, the schools could increase their budget this next year by 3%. I think that's what they're allowed to raise their budgets without actually getting approval from Congress, from the legislature. They could raise their budgets, and some of that money which is given in order to provide property tax relief to property owners could actually not trickle down to those owners, because the schools and the police and the fire department could just absorb that money and use it for their inflated budgets that they've inflated because of the increased revenue that they're getting from the state of Idaho. But lawmakers across the state of Idaho are hoping that that is not what the various tax districts across the state of Idaho are going to do. They are anticipating and hoping that Idahoans will see a decrease in their property tax bill by 10 to 25% this next year. So I want to actually give you a couple examples of how much we're paying in property taxes here in Idaho, and specifically in the Treasure Valley, in which areas of the Treasure Valley have higher tax rates. But first, I wanted to say that I actually work really hard to try and bring you the best information that I can get on the Boise housing market and life in general here in Boise and in Idaho. And so if you are interested in Boise real estate or in moving to Boise, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. The reality is that really does mean a lot to me. For me, it's an indication of how well I'm able to help people like you who are watching my videos, and it gives me an indication of the fact that you actually are enjoying the videos and are getting the value and the information that you would like from the videos that I produce. So let me give you a couple examples of how much we actually pay in property taxes here in the Boise area. So the median property tax in Ada County is $1,634. Half of the people pay more than that, half of the people pay less than that. And the average levy rate across the county is 0.76%, so about 3/4% of the assessed value of one's home. Now that's just an average. Certain areas of the Treasure Valley have higher levy rates, other areas have lower levy rates. So have a look at this map that I made here. By and large, the more expensive property tax areas are going to be northwest Boise, southeast Boise, and the Benj. So if you look at the map there, you'll see that on average, a big kind of a ballpark figure of how much people pay in property taxes in those areas is about 0.867%. Now, if you live in West Boise, that number is less than that. Homeowners there pay about 0.675% in property taxes. The area in the entire Treasure Valley that has the lowest levy rate is Southwest Boise, where I live. And the levy rate there is 0.434 on average. Certain areas are going to be slightly higher or slightly lower than that. And then Meridian is slightly higher than that. It's about a half of a percentage point, so about 0.31% on average of the assessed value of one's home. Now, Ada County actually has the second highest median property tax in the state. The county with the highest median property tax is Blaine County, which is where Sun Valley is, and that's where all the rich and the famous live, like Bruce Willis and others who have really big, expensive houses there. The county with the lowest median property tax is Custer County. Median there is $543 per year. Now, if you look at property taxes by state, Idaho is actually ranked number 37, which is actually not so bad, with the median property tax on average being $1,188 per year, which works out to be a tax rate of 0.69% on average for the state as a whole. The state that has the highest property taxes is New Jersey. Median property taxes in that state are $6,579 for the state, and that number works out to be about 1.89% of the property's assessed value. So on average in Idaho, the levy rate is about half of what the levy rate is in the most expensive state in the country. Personally, I don't really feel like we actually pay all that much in property taxes. But I also live in a fairly small house, so I don't know that I can be indicative of everybody. But the reason we are actually talking about property taxes all the time here in the state of Idaho is the percentage of the median income compared to the total that you pay in property taxes is actually not very good in Idaho. If you were to make the median income here in Ada County, you would pay on average about 2.38% of your annual wage in property taxes. So that's not all that good, which is why lawmakers have put forward this new bill. So hopefully this new law will lower all of our property taxes in Idaho. Again, I think it's just a short-term solution, but if we see a 10 or 25% drop in our property taxes this year, I'd be happy. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not seen my video on visiting Boise and 4 things that you should not miss if you are visiting the area, I think you should check out my video right here. It's probably one of my best ones, actually.